All right, everybody. So we're good to begin with our next talk. Please welcome a talk on the European Digital Identity Wallets by Dr. Johannes Sedlmeir. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So thanks a lot for coming to my talk. So in this talk, I want to introduce you a little bit to what's going on the European level in terms of digital identity. So if you're attending a blockchain conference, then you may be expecting some blockchain-related tech. But in fact, while a lot of what the European Digital Identity Wallet offers was inspired by some of the cryptography that is being used in blockchains, it actually doesn't really contain blockchain anymore. So hopefully I won't disappoint you too much.
Maybe.
So where is the motivation for doing digital identity coming from? So the EU has done quite a few digital identity projects in the last 20 years, and none of them was particularly successful. The first really sophisticated attempt was in 2014 with the eIDAS 1 regulation, which tried to harmonize a little bit the different national eID systems which the different member states of the European Union have. So, for example, the German eID card is very different from, for example, how the Italian digital ID system works. And so the eIDAS system basically gave the member states the opportunity to describe their eID system and created some kind of a hub such that you could use the identification, the eID of your member state to log into some government applications in another member state. So it was not really a technical harmonization, but it still gave some degree of interoperability. And so, particularly during the pandemic, it became apparent that we need more processes with identification in a digital way, and therefore there was quite some pressure to replace some of the physical identification documents also by digital equivalents. So we see a strong need for better login methods, so people are struggling, for example, with maintaining secure passwords, but we also see a need for presenting identity-related documents in a somewhat verifiable way without breaking too much between the different media. So one example could be when I wanted to go to a concert during the COVID pandemic, this could be quite tedious for the people at the door because, for instance, if they needed to check my event ticket and my COVID vaccination passport, then I needed to hand them in both those documents, so maybe this in the Eventbrite app, this as a physical document, and then because the vaccination passport doesn't include a picture of myself, I needed to complement this with an ID card or a passport, which is usually in physical form. So you can imagine the joy of people who need to check 3 documents and then compare, for example, the name of all of those 3 documents. So the queues were being pretty large. And so it would be great if we had an analog that makes the process, which basically is our physical wallet plus some additional documents, in an electronic way that would somehow allow to verify the combination of all of those documents in one single step. So the European Digital Identity Framework was introduced with the revision of the eIDAS regulation, and so this passed the legislative process in the beginning of this year. And so basically we now have a clear roadmap towards what is called the Digital Identity Wallet, which is basically thought as an analog of our physical wallet in which we can manage authentication and also different documents that are machine verifiable, and so we can present those documents to relying parties whenever they ask for it. And so this goes far beyond the scope of the initial eIDAS regulation, because on the one hand it covers not only eIDs, but basically any type of electronic documents about my identity. And it also offers a much stronger technical interoperability in the sense that those interfaces of the wallet and also the formats of those documents stored in the wallet will be harmonized. So what are the functionalities which the European Identity Wallet will offer? So on the one hand, it will still cover identification with our PID data. So this is the data that is usually contained on our passports or eIDs. So this is quite straightforward. But we want to go far beyond this. So we want to offer qualified electronic signatures. So for those of you who have never heard of this qualified, this is basically regulatorily meaningful. So something that is accepted by the legislation and which has a certain legal meaning, and therefore is basically a legally assured and technically audited way to do those things. So we want to sign, for example, documents with our wallet app on our mobile phone. We want to engage in strong customer authentication, which today we already need to do if we, for example, want to do online banking. So then we usually do 2-factor, and so we would like to do this in a slightly easier way. And also login for very large online platforms, like for example Facebook, will be, so Facebook will need to offer login also with the European Union Digital Identity Wallet. So this is covered by the Digital Markets Act. Then there will be e-prescriptions, and there is also qualified or non-qualified electronic attestations and attributes. And this is basically all kinds of machine verifiable attestations that say something about your identity, your qualifications, your authorizations, but which is not necessarily included in the PID data. So think about digital diplomas, sports club membership cards, loyalty cards, airline tickets, all of those kinds of documents. So where is the EUDI wallet coming from? So it has quite some history, basically, in digital identity schemes. So there are concepts that are started very early with public key cryptography. There are some decentralized elements, like for example in the Web of Trust. There is also a very strong regulatory binding, of course, so for example to the IDIS regulation, but it was also very hardly influenced by some blockchain-related digital identity projects, like for example Hyperledger India and Aries, where we had substantial pilots both in the regulated domain but also by companies, and it is also influenced by new standards for such digital identity documents as developed, for instance, by the W3C consortium. So to give you an overview of the different complexities involved in creating such a wallet, I just want to give you some stakeholders that are involved in creating this wallet and in making sure that this has regulatory meaning. So because the wallet needs to support also qualified signatures and qualified electronic attestation of attributes, basically the legislator wants to make sure that certain things cannot go wrong when using this wallet. So what do we need to do for this? So first, the wallet will not directly be implemented by the member states, but basically the member states will certify digital wallets implemented by, hopefully, the private sector. So that means that whoever implements the wallet needs to be audited, so the wallet needs to be open source to make sure that what is happening in the wallet is transparent to the user and that the provider of the wallet cannot, for example, log all of the interactions the user is doing with their wallet. So this is a very strong also not only security but also privacy need. Then we need certifications potentially for the cryptographic parts that are inside our mobile phones, which give some more security to those attestations. Then we need certification for relying parties. So basically, imagine you want to disclose your identity information to a third party, but you don't really know who this third party is. So that means that you will need to identify the relying party to make sure that who you are sending the data is actually the party you intend to send the data to. So imagine you're scanning a QR code when you're at a charging station and you would like to give your credit card information to the charging point operator. It would be quite unlucky if somebody would have put another QR code over this QR code and is redirecting you to a web page and to a provider you didn't want to interact with. So there will need to be some certification of those relying parties, which will go beyond a simple TLS certificate, which is only used for encrypted traffic, but not necessarily for authentication of the relying party. Then you also need to certify the issuers, so basically the providers of assured identity information about yourself who are in the end signing the identity information. So you see that there's a lot of stakeholders, and right now a lot of people in the European Union are very busy drafting all of those standards and all of the requirements that those relying parties and all the other stakeholders need to fulfill in order to get this attestation. So the planned timeline of the EUDI wallets is very ambitious. So basically the regulation was adopted in 2024, and we're already hoping to have implemented wallets in 2026. So basically implementation within 2 years, and then wide acceptance already 1 year later. So a lot of people are quite skeptical if this will be successful, but at least there is a lot of pressure in making the implementation possible, and I think it's quite healthy that this pressure is there, because otherwise we're risking again ending up with basically a nice regulation and a nice vision that is not being acted on. So I also want to give you a quick overview of the most common implementation and adoption challenges. So on the one side, the EUDI wallet, just like most of the other digital ID schemes we're used to, has quite strong security usability trade-offs. So for instance, the regulation for certain kinds of documents demands a device binding. Why is this important? imagine you don't have a device binding and you can easily copy certain attestations from one phone to another, then maybe you could give your EID card also to your younger brother, and your younger brother can go to a discotheque, prove that they are older than 18, even though this is not true. So for certain kinds of documents which require a very strong level of assurance, you need this kind of device binding to protect you against attackers, but also to make sure that no duplication can happen, which causes a much lower degree of certainty that it's really you who is presenting the attestation. But of course, device binding can also be inconvenient, because if you have two mobile phones, one for business and one for your private life, and you need to decide on which of them you want to put your EID, this can be quite uncomfortable. On the other hand, this transferability also extends to, for example, the ability to do backups. So imagine you lose your phone on which you had your EID, then you will need to go through some process to get another EID, like you do today if you lose your wallet with your physical EID. So that also can cause some convenience, but in this case, this convenience loss is probably quite well justified with the very high level of assurance you need. Then protection against bad actors. So I just described to you that you may want to be ensured that you cannot reveal your identity information to any third party. Because as I said, they could just cover the QR code on a charging station by another QR code and you disclose your credit card information to the wrong party. But that means that all of the relying parties that want to ask for information from your wallet need to go through some certification process, which might very well mean that even though we have nice cryptography in this wallet that you can use to prove your identity in a cryptographic way, and that you could then disclose, for example, to a blockchain-based project, could be difficult because maybe this blockchain-based project is not registered in any of those lists that basically whitelists the actors who are allowed to disclose your identity information. So basically, again, we need to find a good balance between giving the opportunity to users who really know what they are doing to basically also send information to potentially non-trusted parties, but on the other hand also making sure that users are not tricked into giving their identity information to somebody they don't want to if they are less literate. Then there are governance challenges, so for example all of the certification for the different stakeholders. Monetization is a quite big challenge because usually the benefits of this digital presentation of identity attributes, they accrue on the relying party side, because for the relying party it gets much easier to check that you have certain authorizations and properties, but the costs usually accrue on the issuer side, so the one who needs to really verify that the identity information they are going to sign is accurate, and who will then have also some legal liability that this information is actually correct. On the other hand, because we don't want to integrate into the wallet an opportunity to track the different interactions of an individual, you can't really set up a direct payment flow between the issuing party and the relying party, because ideally the issuing party doesn't even know when the data they signed is being used. So making the monetary incentives right could actually be a quite big problem, and so it may very well be the case that in the beginning the whole system is mostly bootstrapped by public entities as issuers, because they can just be obliged by law to provide individuals with those attestations they need. And then in the end we have all sorts of privacy challenges which are often at the core of the debate when it comes to design questions. So the good thing is that the European Digital Identity Wallet has selective disclosure natively built in. What does that mean? That means that, for example, if I reveal my digital diploma, I don't need to reveal all of the information in this digital diploma, but only a subset, which is exactly those attributes that the relying party is asking for. So maybe they are asking for my maths grade, but not for my English grade. Then I have the opportunity to reveal only what they've been asking for. And this is particularly important if we're combining data from a lot of different attestations, because if I need to reveal all of those attestations in the full, this could really excessively reveal data to lying parties, even though they don't need this data, which is not only a privacy problem, but also a security problem if you think about social engineering, for instance. Then the regulation also promises unlinkability. So basically that different relying parties should not be able, even if they communicate to each other, to track you and your interactions. And of course also the provider of the wallet and the issuers of your identity information should not be able to see where you are using this information. And so actually this is right now one of the core challenges, because all of the or most of the mechanisms for providing digital attestations based on digital signatures usually are linkable. For example, through the value of the digital signature, through the value of a public key, which is used for binding, and also, for example, through the revocation ID. And so this is where right now a lot of discussion is, and where also a lot of Web3 technology can actually contribute, because, for example, zero-knowledge proofs that allow us to get unlinkability have been developed much further in the context of blockchain projects, both for scaling and for privacy. And so right now there's a lot of debates how we can integrate those improved forms of zero-knowledge proofs into the wallet without actually harming all of the standards that are already agreed on. And last but not least, a very interesting topic, particularly in Germany, is also the distribution of signed data. So if I send to you my digital diploma, then even though you can't claim that this is your diploma, the relying party can still sell this information as authentic because it's carrying a digital signature by the university, and therefore is basically with a high level of assurance or with a high level of confidence, this data will be correct. And so it has more value, for example, on the black market. And people are arguing that this might be an incentive for criminals to sell this data or to get more data because they can sell it on a higher price. And this is one of the core reasons, for instance, why the German EID is avoiding the distribution of signed data. And instead, it's basically creating an authenticated channel. And then once in this channel, you know you're talking to an EID, you basically believe in the data it is sending without the data being signed. And so fortunately, with the help of those new cryptographic tools, we can also mimic this unsigned data in a pretty nice way, which is called a designated verifier proof. How does that work? Imagine I can prove to you that I own a valid diploma without showing the actual diploma to you. I just prove to you with the help of a zero-knowledge proof that I have a digital diploma which is signed by a university, which includes the degree I'm claiming, and maybe that I'm also the owner of this diploma because I can reveal a certain, or I know a certain cryptographic key that proves I know the secret key according to a public key. Now, if I send this proof to you, then even though it's a zero-knowledge proof, usually they are non-interactive. That means if you forward this zero-knowledge proof, you could still convince a third party that this information is correct. But now I do a small trick. Instead of proving you that I have this valid diploma, I will prove, for example, to you that either I have such a valid digital diploma or I know your private key. Now this will obviously convince you that I need to have this digital diploma because you took a lot of care about your private key. But if you forward this information to anyone else, they won't really know whether you picked the easy way and just prove knowledge of your own private key, which is trivial, or my proof is correct, which could be hard for you to forge. So no third party will actually have the opportunity, or no third party can trust in the authenticity of this information, which then basically is as good as sending unsigned data. And so I think at this time I will go to the questions. So I've touched a lot of concepts that we know from Web3 as well. So even though the way the European digital identity wallets are looking right now doesn't have too much to do with the original blockchain-based discussions anymore, a lot of tooling from blockchain will actually come in very handy. And I'm particularly curious also in how digital identity wallets can then later interact also with blockchain-based solutions, for which we don't need those privacy features very strongly, because all of the information put on the blockchain is usually public or transparent, and so we really need all of the data minimizing capabilities which the European identity wallet promised us in a very strong way.
So do we have any questions from the crowd? Great.
Yeah, thanks for this great overview. I just have a déjà vu, to be honest, because there are many similar discussions on interoperable operation with the IDAS 1.0. We actually have a system, we have the protocols, we have many great ideas. At the end of the day, it's states being incapable of operating some infrastructure. And being very slow in implementing standards, etc., etc. In my opinion, or from my point of view, we have the same settings with a lot of added complexity, which can, in many cases, probably completely overwhelm the people that are in charge of identity and access management in governments. do you see a light at the end of the tunnel? Or do you think it's going to be different this time? Or are we just going to see EIDAS 1.0 fail again?
So I think some of the complexity or some of the reason why EIDAS 1.0 was not overly successful is that it doesn't really go beyond identification. And so if you think about it, you don't need identification with your EID very frequently. So if I need this once or twice a year only, because maybe I need to open a bank account and maybe I need to log into some governmental service to, I don't know, confirm my organ donorship, which was in the media last year, this is not a very strong incentive to, for example, download the Ausweis app in Germany, to activate the EID function, to get familiar with its functionality and so on. And so one of the strong hopes is that coming from the pretty bad adoption of the EID, maybe we can make it more adopted if we integrate more functionality in this wallet that is then also more frequently used. For example, in all of the login processes where you may today use, I don't know, Microsoft Authenticator or any of your 2FA solutions of your choice, maybe if you learn that you can now have a single application which offers you EID, which offers you strong authentication, and which can also simplify some of the processes, like, for example, applying when you need to show your diploma, or also renting a car where you may need a digital driver's license, credit card, and identity, then hopefully there are some kind of network effects and you use it so often that you get used to it and that the value for the user becomes bigger. Now, unfortunately, this requires a lot of prerequisites because we need to have access to all of those attestations. And so I guess that particularly in the beginning, it will be very important to not fail too often. Because imagine, like, you're now enthusiastic, you've read this nice ad by the EU, you're downloading the wallet, and now you want to engage in the first interaction, and then it just doesn't work because you don't have the required attestations to show. Then that's already frustrating. And if this happens twice or 3 times, then probably people won't bother looking at it again, even though it might be a nice construction. So I feel that basically the first maybe 2 years or so will be quite important, and that also there's a lot of advertisement. And of course, like, integrating the wallet into public services is also one of the prerequisites of this to work. And unfortunately, as far as I know, this is like, so governments should offer the login with the wallet into those services, but they don't need to yet. So they basically mandate it like Facebook and other very large online platforms, but not the public services. So maybe this could also be a problem then in the long run.